world would come to know him as one of the most infamous serial killers in history. A man whose boyish charm and calculated intelligence masked a monstrous darkness. But before the headlines, before the courtroom dramas, and before his name became synonymous with evil, Ted Bundy was just a young man living among us. Ordinary to the untrained eye, unremarkable to those passing him on the street. Yet hidden beneath his charismatic smile was a predator studying his prey and perfecting his craft. It is here, in the quiet suburbs of mid-20th century America, that the story begins. Ted Bundy was born Theodore Robert Cowell on November 24th, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont. His mother, Eleanor Louise Cowell, known as Louise, was just 22 years old, unmarried, and facing the crushing social stigma of raising a child out of wedlock in post-war America. To shield the family from scandal, Louise's parents raised Ted as their own son. Louise, meanwhile, was introduced to the world as his older sister. For years, Bundy grew up believing his grandparents were his parents, and his mother was simply a sibling. It was a lie that would quietly erode his sense of identity. Imagine a young boy in a modest home in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. A boy playing in the yard, smiling for neighbors, but inside he's confused. His family's truths are not truths at all. Bundy's grandfather, Samuel Cowell, was a volatile, often violent man. Account from relatives and neighbors suggest that Samuel had a temper and engaged in abusive behavior toward his wife and animals. Bundy, impressionable and observant, witnessed this at an early age. Some psychologists later suggested that these early exposures to volatility and cruelty may have helped plant the seeds of his own detachment from empathy. When Bundy was still a child, his mother relocated them to Tacoma, Washington. She eventually married Johnny Bundy, a hospital cook, who formally adopted Ted and gave him his now famous surname. Bundy's relationship with his stepfather was strained. Johnny tried to involve Ted in family activities, camping trips, church events, meals together, but Ted often withdrew. He was a boy who seemed friendly enough, yet distant, often retreating into his own world. From a young age, Bundy displayed behaviors that hinted at something more than simple introversion. Some neighbors recalled incidents of him sneaking around their homes at night, peering into windows. Others remembered him setting up crude traps in the woods, seemingly for no reason other than his own amusement. Despite these unsettling behaviors, Bundy learned early on that charm could be a powerful tool. He was intelligent, articulate, and conventionally attractive, traits that allowed him to blend in. In high school, he was never the most popular student, but he knew how to make himself likable when it suited his needs. Friends and classmates would later recall him as polite and well-spoken. There was no hint, at least on the surface, of the predator he would become. Bundy's ability to present a mask of normalcy would later be one of his most dangerous weapons. Bundy enrolled at the University of Puget Sound before transferring to the University of Washington in Seattle. It was here that he began studying psychology, a chilling irony that would later serve him well in manipulating his victims. At the university, Bundy began dating Stephanie Brooks, a pseudonym, a young woman from a wealthy California family. She was beautiful, sophisticated, and represented a life Bundy desperately wanted: status, wealth, and acceptance into high society. When the relationship ended, Brooks citing his immaturity and lack of direction, Bundy was devastated. Friends noticed a shift in his demeanor. He became more determined, more calculating, and more focused on presenting himself as the kind of man who could win her back. It's difficult to pinpoint Bundy's first murder. Some experts believe he may have started killing as early as his teenage years, possibly linked to unsolved disappearances in the Pacific Northwest. What is certain is that by the early 1970s, young women began vanishing under strange circumstances in the Seattle area. Most were in their late teens or early 20s, attractive, with long brown hair parted in the middle, a detail Bundy seemed fixated on. Witnesses began reporting a man who matched Bundy's description approaching women in public places. College campuses, parks, crowded streets. His method was disarmingly simple. He would feign an injury or helplessness, often wearing a sling or using crutches, and ask for help carrying something to his car. Once his victim was close enough, the facade dropped. One of the earliest confirmed victims was Linda and Healy, a 21-year-old University of Washington student. On the morning of February 1st, 1974, Linda failed to show up for work. Friends went to her apartment and found something strange. Her bed neatly made, but the sheets were stained with blood. Her nightgown was missing, along with some clothing. There was no sign of forced entry. Linda was never seen alive again. Within months, more women disappeared: Donna Manson, Susan Rancourt, Roberta Parks. The disappearances shared haunting similarities. All young, all attractive, all last seen near public areas where Bundy could easily blend in. The pattern was beginning to emerge. But in 1974, law enforcement wasn't yet connecting all the dots. The turning point came on July 14, 1974, at Lake Sammamish State Park. It was a bright summer Sunday, and the park was crowded with families and sunbathers. Several women reported being approached by a man with his arm in a sling. He introduced himself as Ted and claimed he needed help loading a sailboat onto his car. 2 women agreed to accompany him, but grew uneasy and backed out. Later that day, 2 women, Janice Ott and Denise Naslund, vanished from the park. Witnesses described the same man, the same sling, the same name, Ted. It was the first time Bundy's real first name had been linked to a disappearance. It was the summer of 1974, and the Pacific Northwest was gripped by fear. Women were vanishing at an alarming rate. Their last moments traced back to public places, approached by a man named Ted, a man who could appear harmless, even friendly, until the mask slipped. One of the people who recognized the composite sketch circulated by police was Elizabeth Klopfer, Ted Bundy's girlfriend. She had noticed odd behaviors: stolen items in his possession, strange late-night absences, and a collection of plaster casts matching the injuries he often faked. She even called the police to report her suspicions. But Bundy was clever, and without concrete evidence, he remained free. By late 1974, Bundy left Washington for Salt Lake City, Utah, enrolling in law school. On the surface, he appeared to be turning his life around. Charming classmates, dressing well, and speaking with the confidence of a future lawyer. Behind the scenes, the murders continued. On October 2nd, 1974, Nancy Wilcox, a 16-year-old high school student, vanished. Just 2 weeks later, Deborah Kent disappeared after leaving a school play. In between, 17-year-old Melissa Smith's body was found in a nearby canyon. Utah authorities began to suspect a serial predator was operating in the area. On August 16, 1975, Bundy was pulled over in Granger, Utah, after a patrol officer noticed his Volkswagen Beetle behaving suspiciously. Inside, police found burglary tools, a crowbar, ski mask, gloves, rope, and handcuffs. Though these items alone weren't enough for a murder charge, investigators now had a person of interest who matched the description from multiple abduction cases. A search warrant for Bundy's apartment uncovered more circumstantial evidence, including a stash of plaster casting materials and a crowbar matching marks found at one abduction site. In 1976, Bundy was tried in Utah for the aggravated kidnapping of Carol Durange, a woman who had narrowly escaped his grasp. She testified that Bundy had posed as a police officer, claiming her car had been broken into. Once inside his vehicle, she realized something was wrong and managed to escape after a violent struggle. Bundy was convicted and sentenced to 1 to 15 years in prison. But authorities in Colorado were also building a case against him for the murder of Karen Campbell, a 23-year-old nurse who had vanished from a Colorado ski lodge. In June 1977, Bundy was extradited to Colorado to stand trial for Campbell's murder. He acted as his own attorney, a decision that allowed him special privileges, including access to the law library. It was during one of these library visits that Bundy made his first escape, leaping from a second-story window while guards weren't watching. He was free for 6 days before being recaptured. Bundy's second escape came just 6 months later, in December 1977. This time, he cut a hole in the ceiling of his cell, climbed into the crawl space, and broke through into the apartment of the chief jailer, who was away for the night. By the time guards discovered his absence, Bundy had been gone for hours. He fled to Florida. In the early hours of January 15, 1978, Bundy entered the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. In just 15 minutes, he bludgeoned and strangled 2 women, Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy, and severely injured two others. The brutality shocked even seasoned investigators. The crime scene was a nightmare of violence. Bite marks left on Lisa Levy's body would later become a key piece of forensic evidence. Just 3 weeks later, Bundy abducted and murdered 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, his youngest known victim. On February 15, 1978, Bundy was pulled over by Pensacola Police Officer David Lee for driving a stolen car. After a brief struggle, Bundy was arrested, back in custody. The web of evidence began to close in. Witnesses, forensic matches, and Bundy's own arrogance all contributed to his downfall. Bundy's Florida trials were a media spectacle. He once again acted as his own attorney, questioning witnesses and addressing the court with a strange mix of charm and defiance. In the Chi Omega trial, the prosecution presented the bite mark evidence, matched to Bundy's dental impressions. It was a smoking gun. He was convicted and sentenced to death. In a separate trial for Kimberly Leach's murder, Bundy was again convicted and sentenced to death. Bundy spent nearly a decade on death row. During this time, he granted interviews, offering partial confessions and hinting at more victims than were ever confirmed. Some estimates suggest Bundy may have killed more than 30 women. In the days before his execution, Bundy admitted to murders across several states, often revealing chilling details of his methods. On January 24, 1989, Ted Bundy was executed in Florida's electric chair. Outside the prison, crowds cheered, holding signs that read, "Burn Bundy, burn." Inside, Bundy's final word was simple: "I'd like you to give my love to my family and friends." Bundy's crimes changed the way America viewed danger. He shattered the stereotype of the strange-looking predator. He was proof that evil could wear a friendly smile. Law enforcement adapted, improving interagency communication, refining criminal profiling, and developing new forensic techniques. Bundy's story remains one of the most studied cases in criminal history, a chilling reminder that the most dangerous monsters are often the ones we least suspect. Ted Bundy's life was a paradox, a man who could inspire trust while planning unthinkable acts. His calculated charm and ruthless cunning have left an enduring scar on the American psyche. As we close this chapter on one of history's most notorious killers, we are reminded that the greatest danger is often hidden in plain sight. Stay aware, stay vigilant, and never underestimate the masks people wear. If you found this story compelling and want to explore more chilling true crime cases, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. Your support helps us bring you more in-depth, fact-driven stories from the darkest corners of history.